Hello, welcome to this program post. The program post has the title Time to Wake Up, Managing and Cooperating with Hyperscalers. My name is Harald Torbjørnsen, and I'm the Managing Director for the Norwegian Association for Municipal Information Security and Privacy, a member association. It's a great pleasure for me to be able to introduce this program post. I think it's a very important issue to address. And to help us with this, we have guests from the Netherlands, we have from Google on a European level, and we have the Norwegian Directorate for Education, and we have COS. From my left side here, Ida Thorsrud is project leader at COS. We have António Gonçalves, who is a privacy regulatory affairs lead, Google Cloud. We have Seila Akagic, something like that. Have me excused. Privacy Senior Legal Counsel, Ministry of Justice and Security from the Netherlands. And we have Dekker, Senior Legal Counsel, Ministry of Justice and Security in the Netherlands. And we have Morten Rosenkvist, the Director for the Norwegian Directorate for Education. Welcome, thank you all. To lead us in this matter, I will introduce to you Christian Larsen from KS. He is a special advisor and a project leader for Skolesek, which we are cooperating a lot with. So, enjoy.
Thank you, and thank you to all attending on stream as well. I hope this will be an interesting hour, and we're just to repeat it, we're so happy to have these lineup of competent people in this particular and very interesting session. And before we start, I think it's time to remind us on the goal of this, is sharing the best practices on how to succeed with national digitalization project involving new forms of thinking, collaboration, and stronger national management coordination as a question. And what is your takeaway from this, or what is the giveaway we will provide you with? That is hopefully to give you some examples of practical experiences, knowledge, and not to mention the sheer value of cooperating locally, nationally, and above all internationally, because we are framed by the same legal framework, all of us, and we can't deal with these big issues and big problems if we don't cooperate across borders. And hence we are so happy to have both Seila and Rob from the Netherlands here. And the other important party to bring along is the purveyor and the solution provider itself, and having those from a level that can actually make a difference. And António, thank you for coming. And one of the primary interests in this is the Directorate for Education, which provides us with the frames for how we are to do these operations now and in the future. So Morten, we're really happy to have you here, because you are one of the big stakeholders in this, and we really, really appreciate you. And I mustn't forget Ida either, because she's been doing a lot of this work for us and with us, and welcome to you as well. Managing large international companies like Google, Microsoft, and Amazon requires a level of competence that many people and many municipalities and governments lack. Currently, the Netherlands has paved the way and done a lot of work that we have been very fortunate to be able to get knowledge of, and which we hope you will share with us today. And they've done that through the Ministry of Justice, conducting assessments on a national level. And one of the issues we will address today is how can we make it possible for local and regional authorities to assess, take ownership, and make sound decisions and be compliant to a larger degree than they might be today. And the reason we are here today is also because KS, in close cooperation with Bergen municipality, if there's anybody from Bergen attending on stream, thank you for taking the initiative. And a lot of small municipalities in Norway who asked us to do this for them and with them. And hence we engaged Ida to lead this. Also KINS, who has participated actively on contributing through being on the steering committee and being a very good provider of advices and resources and communication, etc., etc. So we pay a big respect for what you've done from the KINS side. On this backdrop, we will have a discussion where certain generic experiences will be discussed. The way that the Dutch authorities have approached these large vendors and how they've strategically managed to cope with them, and their best practices. And I will emphasize that it will not delve into DPIA as a subject or Google as a supplier, but on the basis of what we have achieved and what you have experienced. We hope you will see what you can bring home and take into your own organization, and which can be shared and can lead to a better way of handling privacy for the registered, for the subjects, in this case, kids and students. So I think we should start with the guests coming from farthest away, and geographically I say that you are from the farthermost place, Seila and Rob. So, Bas, sorry. In retrospect, first question, what would you like to have known before starting your work with national project and national handling of big vendors, and how would you have done things differently if you should give yourself a piece of advice? And Bas and Seila, do take your time, 2-3 minutes to say what you would have done differently and what piece of advice would you have given yourself?
To my younger self, if I were to start now.
Mm-hmm.
Well, my name is Seila Akagic, and we work at strategic vendor management for Google, AWS, and Microsoft. I have worked here for 3 years now. What kind of advice I would give myself, right? Well, we have experienced in the last couple of years that it's quite a challenging surroundings, you know. It's quite, the expertise which is necessary is quite complex and advanced. Mm-hmm. So we have tried so far to invest a lot of resources on engaging a lot of expertise from within, from inside the Dutch government. Hence, Bas and myself were hired. But we also have 3 other colleagues, so there's 5 of us, which we all have different kind of expertise we bring along. Mm-hmm. But also we hire external expertise as well. Mm-hmm. So we hire certain kind of lawyers and also certain kind of technologists, which are quite necessary, in our opinion, for the DPIAs, which are as complex as the Google ones or the Microsoft ones or AWS's ones. So I came from the Dutch Data Protection Authority, and I was quite familiar with the topic, but still it's just like the next level of privacy in general. And the hyperscalers is the next level of complexity. So yeah, that would be like small piece of advice to just not underestimate and hire the necessary expertise.
Anything
Bas?
to add, Bas?
Yeah, thank you, Seila. I definitely have something to add to that. First of all, I fully agree, of course. But Christian, what you told us, we live in very interesting times, and it's very interesting the topics that we're dealing with on a daily basis. In a very nutshell, I could say, well, do not underestimate how much time it could take to be very thorough, and that's what we're doing. So basically what we're doing is, for the Dutch central government, we're conducting framework agreements. So that's kind of the legal part, you could say. On the other hand, we're also conducting umbrella DPIAs, and it's certainly, of course, it could be the case that high risks occur, and then we have to mitigate those. And to do this thoroughly, it takes quite some time and some effort. and that was something that kind of surprised me. Of course, we are very result-driven, so to say. So yeah, that's it for me.
So resilience and time-consuming is the key word in your process, is it?
Definitely.
Could it be?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. It's interesting. Morten, you've been involved in this during the last year as head of the Direktørat, and the ongoing work on a new support services is going on. And if you were to take one step back and end up at the same time, probably here in 2023, where you were.
I was here.
Yeah. What kind of advice would you have given yourself, given the process that has been rapidly taking place since we were here last time?
No, first of all, I will echo the point from our Dutch colleagues that don't underestimate the time it takes to set up the legal framework and sort the whole legal framework out, and the thoroughness and the time and the difficulties that you have to really dig deep, look into it, understand. It's only then that you actually understand what risks do I have, how can I manage them, what are the solutions, and so on. And when it's not so often that I go to dinner parties and people ask me about digital privacy, but if it happens, I would say something like, it's easier. I mean, to build the solution, whatever you want to build, is easier than actually sorting out all the legal framework that you need for the solution to work and the privacy to actually be well kept. So that's a major one. I want to add two more things that myself and I think many others tend to underestimate, and that is that whatever solution you actually land on and how you deal with privacy and the whole system in a Norwegian context, and that's why also I want to learn more about the Dutch experience, because we have to fit this into 357 municipalities and 15 counties. And I mean, by law, it's the municipalities that's responsible for doing this, but you don't have to talk with many municipalities until you understand that, of course, we need to see a bit of another balance, that it's not feasible that 357 has both the competence and the capacity to work this out. So, and then there, within that frame, there's many possibilities. You could say, well, then the government should fix everything. Yeah, I'm not so sure about that, but another balance and discussion about, so what does the central level do? What are we best at? What are our assets? Where can we contribute and give effect? And what is it best that the municipalities do? And this is a discussion that we need to have. The third thing, it's all about the money. And very often again, perhaps a bit dinner party-like, but people say, well, we need more money, and it's not I who's going to pay, it's someone else. Of course, and especially in Norway, as we all know, in the context where everyone can say, well, we have a sovereign wealth fund and we can, always have some more billions from there. In my work, it tends to be underestimated how we're going to organize who pays and how do they pay, and because that's very important for how everything is going to work, and and that again with the whole governance system of it. And it also has aspects that if you're a paying customer, you have different stakes than some ministers have said, well, I give 10 million or 100 million or whatever lump sum, to the directors, and it's just going to fix it for all the municipalities. And of course, this we have experience with in Norway with SICT and the model that universities use, FEIDE and so on. So in short, so it's the legal don't underestimate the legal difficulties, don't underestimate the governance, don't underestimate the money.
That was a long one, and I think I think we're going to revert to a lot of those subjects you have, particularly those about money, and that this is not an easy process. It's not a quick fix for anything, just to make that statement clear. António, representing Google in this setting, what would you have done differently, and what kind of advice would you have had given yourself if you'd seen yourself in retrospect from today till back in 2023 when we approached you for the first time from Ida's side?
Well, I think, as they say, hindsight is 20/20, and for sure, over the last few years, when we've partnered up first with the Dutch government and now more recently with the Norwegian public sector, certainly we've learned a lot of things. I don't know what they would have changed, but I can share perhaps two that I think, on reflection, would have been interesting to know before. The first one, from a Google looking outside perspective, is that we were perhaps not aware of how different entities, customers, public entities, come to this topic, and the difference in terms of resources that they might have, the differences in terms of understanding that they might have, and so basically their capacity for receiving and implementing our products. And I think there's a couple of reasons for this. The first one is, of course, that we tend to see the GDPR, which is the prevailing regulation in this space still, as a sort of monolithic regulation that should solve all the problems. It should apply in principle, and does apply in principle, to all the countries in the European Union, plus EEA. So, there is always the temptation to think that, okay, so that is the standard. Those are the rules, the requirements that everyone needs to follow. But as we all know, probably in this room and certainly around this panel, there is a world of complexities and local specificities and very specific risks that only apply to specific actors, or depending on the industry, or depending on the data that you're processing. Having that understanding that, yes, you do have a common framework, but you might still have differences requiring on-the-spot assessments, I think would have been helpful, also from an internal perspective, so that we could have mobilized even earlier than we did. I think the second reason why this is the case is that we tend to develop products that are quite easy to implement. Some of them even plug and play. And so we also, I think in the beginning, were not completely aware of the difficulties that controllers might feel when trying to access information about that product. Because we've obviously invested a lot of time and effort in this area. We have our GDPR resource centers, DPIA resource centers, blog posts, audit reports. But that doesn't mean that they're known. That doesn't mean that each controller has the capacity to actually go there, understand, take the information that they need for their own assessments. So that was also a lesson learned. The second lesson learned that I would highlight, and this is more of a Google internally looking in, is that we should not be afraid to engage with the public sector. Not that we ever were, but of course it can be, I imagine that maybe for a small company or a small municipality, it can be daunting or intimidating to deal with a hyperscaler. Well, let me tell you, it is also daunting for a hyperscaler to deal with the public sector, particularly in an area such as the GDPR that comes with fines attached, enforcement powers, the possibility of reputational hits. And so I think from an organizational perspective, we have also been quite cautious in how we approach things, trying to do the right thing, but cautious in how we engage with the public sector. And I think these two recent experiences are a good sign that there's much to be gained by doing that.
To sum up all you three parties here, I think the challenges are quite big and quite broad in both economic and legal and other perspectives as well. But Ida, if you should take yourself into a trip into hindsight and see, what would you have done differently, and what piece of advice would you have given yourself today if you looked at yourself a year ago?
No, that's a question that I really love, and I think I'm just gonna piggyback off of Bas and Seila on this one, because I tend to underestimate how much time things take. That's a large one, and also to your point, António, the biggest piece of our DPIA, so we have done DPIA for the like an umbrella DPIA for Google Workspace for Education, and the idea is that we finish as much as we can, the common parts of a DPIA, and then the local municipalities can take that and adjust it, implement it into assessments that they already have. And the biggest piece of it was actually describing what products that we are assessing, like the different processing activities, how municipalities actually process personal data. That is something that I knew was going to be the most time-consuming piece, but I underestimated how time-consuming it would be, as I always do. So that's a big one. And another thing is that the way we organize the work is that we bought time from the different municipalities. Like they have, most of the project members were people who have done these assessments on a local level, and we bought their time. So they worked part-time for us. And I wished I would have known how much of an exchange that would be. I tend to be very cautious about not wasting their time because I know that they worked part-time for us. They have other responsibilities in their municipalities. And I didn't foresee how much of a benefit they would have from working with us as well. Like I thought that, I mean, they are doing us a service, but also they got like a lot from it. It was really like a really good exchange of everybody learned something, and 2 + 2 = 4. It didn't equal 4. It equaled like 5 or like 16. Like that's sort of an exponential benefit from working together.
Yeah. And we've been talking about the equation. That the equation is not right anymore. 2 + 2 is not 4. What is it, would you say?
16, maybe?
16, 20.
Something like that.
Because the more you share, the more you get. And that is the bottom line of this particular project, according to my opinion, at least. Yeah. Okay. You've been paving the way, Seila and Bas. Why and how did you start doing your strategic vendor management in the Netherlands? And what does it imply from the governmental perspective in your context?
I could say a little bit about the history. I'll keep it very short. But probably around 2015, the National Committee on behalf of the Dutch central government did an investigation towards ICT projects within the government. And one of the recommendations was to have an SLM, or strategic vendor management, in terms of efficiency. So really, bottom line, efficiency is key here. And also one other important thing to add to that, in my opinion, is that it is an ongoing process. So once we just did all the work we just addressed, we're not there. Of course, as we all know, a lot of new regulations and a lot of legislation from Europe is coming into light. And of course, new products are also coming there. So it really makes sense to have one organization dealing with that on behalf of participants and public entities.
Yeah. If I may add something else, we can also be a little bit honest. There were quite some IT projects in the Netherlands which were not that successful before that. So that's why this parliamentary commission was engaged to do this research Bas was talking about. And their recommendation was to centralize this approach, right? So procurement is also centralized. We are not actually procuring body. We are just compliance regulating body helping the procurement. So that's how it's organized in the Netherlands. We have these 3 hyperscalers, including Google, but there are also SAP, Oracle, IBM, and they have been placed within another ministry. So we have been divided between ministries. That's probably a political decision, right? So in that way, we centralize the effort, the resources, and the idea is just to be more effective, efficient. Cost-wise, we should be going down, right? Because we are doing all this work for everybody. And it has been proven to do so. Yeah. So it's kind of doing what it's supposed to do. But we are adjusting along the way, right? Because we started with Microsoft, I'm sorry, and then we added AWS and Google along the way. And we are also thinking about some European options as well, if they catch up ever to you guys. But yeah, that's kind of the idea behind it. To create a level playing field, from which you could be able to choose, like a government. And we are a central government organization, so we actually do this work for the whole central government.
And I just might have missed it, but for how long have you been undertaking these missions?
I think this report was 2014, and Rob has stayed the longest. Rob is the guy who didn't come. Yeah. He started in 2016, and I'm from 3 years back. You were 2 years?
Yeah, so probably over 10 years.
Yeah.
So you've been doing this for give or take a 10 years time.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's fair to assess that if each and every municipality or school in the Netherlands should do this, and in Norway, it would have taken a lot more time, and you probably would have been not working in Google, I can assume, if all municipalities should do the same approach towards the vendors. António.
So I guess this brings the question on, Bas, you mentioned efficiency, right? It's, you can start adding up the time it takes to do one DPA versus 2 DPAs versus 350 something DPAs. And so in that sense, you are correct that I would probably not last the entire amount of time needed to do the DPAs, yes.
Morten, the same question goes for you. You touched into it previously, but strategic vendor management, what does it imply from the governmental perspective, and would it be an infringement on the local autonomy or local governance, or would it actually free up available time, or how do you see that from your perspective?
Well, I think that well conducted it would definitely free up time, and it will, it will be efficient. But one thing is to say it here, and but the hard part is actually to find where is that right balance. You talk about, of course, you do a level playing field, but it's easy to fall into that you actually some sort of market regulator. At least it's been my experience. So, you always have to watch, is it now that you have to be government sponsored to get into anything, who controls that? It's a lot of open questions. That's for one thing. The other thing is that in Norway, we have all these municipalities because we truly believe that it's better to make decisions, close to the citizens. So we can't fall too much on, centralization, government, one size fits all. No. So it's kind of, yes, I think it is sufficient, but we have to work very hard to stay kind of in the middle of the road. And I also think it has to be a lot of try and fail to actually find that right balance, because you can't really sit in an office in Oslo and say this is the absolutely correct way to do it, and it's going to work precisely as it says in my manual. And I would actually like to ask Dutch colleagues, what's your experience in this field? Did it work the way you wanted the first time, or?
Yeah, I think it's very important that at the end of the day, of course, we are responsible, but the public entities who are a controller in GDPR terms, they are really responsible. So of course, they can use our work and look what we've done, but they still always have to think, well, whether they agree or not, and have to do their own assessment. So that's a very important point we also we always make. So to some extent, that's probably an answer to your concern, which I really understand, of course.
Yeah, maybe to add, you said controlling the market. This research that was done before we were established was need-based. So there was an analysis of what are we needing, what are we using within the government, And then there were these SLMs made. So we were not promoting any company from the market. We were looking at our government and choosing what stuff do we need. So that's how this couple of vendors popped up. And of course they can be broadened, preferably within Europe, if that's an option. But we also need to be real, right? You need to work at a certain level. You need also IT on a certain level. So if you want to be able to perform, you also need the digital tools to be able to work on that level. So it is a balancing act. I agree with you on that one, and we get that question a lot. But yeah, it's a work in progress.
Yeah, yeah. We're still quite early in the Norwegian context, so to speak. António, if you were to describe how would a good customer, being private or public, what describes one of these customers succeeding in managing and complying with the legal frameworks, and what is the common denominator for those clients of yours and those public and other customers you're dealing with? What is the common denominator and what describes them?
Well, I think first of all, the first common denominator is the fact that they all attribute significant amount of importance to privacy. So for them, this is not a bolt-on, an additional assessment or task that you need to do. This is very much fundamental in the way that the tools are going to be used. I think that cuts across the public sector, probably because it's part of their mandate, probably because they have to administer the public good. But I think that immediately comes up. I'm not saying that private customers don't have this concern, but of course they are of a different nature, of different character, so they might have different attitudes to risk. So that's the first common denominator. The second is, I would say also, the need for clarity, the need for clarity and transparency. I would actually say that this is common to public sector and private sector. So I think there's a lot of demand in the market, in different entities, for having clear interpretation of the rules, clear interpretation of the requirements, in a way, not in a way that tells them exactly what to do, but in a way that sort of limits their responsibility or their action, knowing that this is acceptable, this is also acceptable, and between these two solutions, I'm going to find my spot based on my assessment of the risk, based on my attitude towards the risk. Now, one that's maybe a little bit less negative. Another common denominator is maybe it's questionable, we can debate this, but maybe still some immaturity in terms of identifying and managing risk. What I mean by this is that one of the key things, I think, in my opinion, of the GDPR is that it proposes a risk-based approach. And that's why it doesn't say that one thing is correct or the other thing is correct. It says you need to assess the risk, and then you need to take the appropriate measures in response to the risk. But there are multiple responses to risks. You can accept it. In some cases, I think the margin for doing that in the public sphere is lower, but potentially is still there. So could we see that happening? But you can also transfer that. You can also eliminate it completely. That's ideal. Or you can mitigate it. But as you can see, even in the mitigation part, you still end up with something. You still end up with a residual risk that might never be eliminated. And the GDPR also foresees that. So that's maybe a common denominator, is I don't yet see, based on my work with the public sector, a holistic ability to think about risk in this manner. But I don't know if this is a very unfair statement, and I look forward to the debate.
Well, perhaps I can say a few words, but because I think you have some really good points, and I think that what is a bit immature, it's often that the acceptance of risk. Say that, okay, we've done the assessments, we have identified the risks, we have taken down some, we have done this and this. This is the risk that's left, and we accept it. And I experience it in my role as director now, and before that I was the director of the Student Loan Bank, which is all based on digital solutions. And you would always have someone say, well, we should do even more, because we have to go to zero. And I always, found it hard to get acceptance and say to go to zero is impossible, and even go close to zero, it costs so much taxpayer money, and the risk is so small. So let's rather accept the risk. But that was hard, and I think that a lot of public sector is, still is immature in this, and has to go a few rounds with itself. But then again, I would say that speaking openly about it, getting experience with it, and also, getting other partners and being trained it, I think it, I hope that I can be here in a couple of years and say, yes, this is actually something we've gotten better at.
Can I just a quick follow-up? I
Yeah.
use the word immaturity. I would like to replace it with difficulty.
Yeah.
Difficulty taking these decisions, because it's quite obvious that even in public entities, or particularly in public entities, you have people who are knowledgeable of these matters and are discussing these matters. But for some reason, such as the ones that you mentioned, still difficulty in accepting the risk.
Yeah, I have an
Yeah,
addition,
come
if
on,
I may,
yeah.
because I come from law enforcement.
Yeah.
So I agree with the change to not accepting. It's quite difficult. Education sector, law enforcement, police, customs. It's kind of melted in the situation and in everything that's connected to it. So acceptance of risk is not always an option. Sometimes it's just exclusion of certain working processes for that kind of services or products. So that also worked in our case. That's what we suggested, like a mitigating measure, to just not use it for sensitive data of some sort. So that's also, it's never going to be mature for the police department, for example, because they cannot accept that kind of risk.
Well, we'll revert to many of these hindrances and things a bit later on. But Ida, you've been handling a lot of representatives from a various variety of municipalities and competence in your time in this project. Based on your experiences in the Google DPIA in Norway, what would you say would be the most grave consequences we face if we don't start governing more cooperatively and more professionally? Is it fair to assume that privacy and given rights are taken care of in Norwegian schools and municipalities as per se?
Yeah, that is a really
Based on the
large
experiences
question.
from we have.
Yeah. I think the risk of not getting this right is some things that we see in the screen backlash. It's about trust.
Yeah.
We have a large level of trust in our institutions in this country, and that's such a value.
Yeah.
And frankly, sometimes I think we take it for granted.
Yeah.
I think the risk is to that sort of society that we will get with a lot of trust in institutions. That's a really hard society to live in. When it comes to the question of like how, because that was your question, right? Like how good are municipalities at dealing with this today?
Yeah.
It depends on where you are.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I have to give like a really lawyery answer to that.
Yeah.
Though what I will say is that our whole project was based on incorporating people who work in municipalities, who have done DPIAs of these hyperscalers, who have written records of processings, so really know where the shoe fits. And a lot of them do tremendous work and are really, really knowledgeable.
Yeah.
And I don't always think that it's a resource issue. Sometimes I do think it's more of a, I wanted to say leadership issue, that's maybe not that sound to say here, but like that it's sometimes difficult for us that are subject matter experts to like communicate risk and communicate like the value of this. I think, so I think we wouldn't have succeeded if we didn't have people from the technical level of municipalities, the pedagogical level from schools, or even the legal level. So
One example is the everlasting discussion on the lawful basis of processing, right?
Yeah.
That has been tedious.
Yeah, that was one of the things that I didn't foresee that was going to be an issue, like another lesson learned, right?
Yeah.
Like, I always underestimate the things that are going to be issues. There are things that I thought would be like more of a problem, wasn't a problem. And then there are some things that are really like, but again, like having that closeness with municipalities, I think that's really important to succeed in this work, because then we know where the shoe fits. Like, we got to see that municipalities don't have issues with the right to protest, right? Like, how do you as a public entity like realize the right to protest? So then we had to do things about it, and we had the freedom to like go after those crumbs, and that was really useful.
Yeah. Thank you, Morten. When I was a kid, I had a favorite, or youngster, I had a favorite band called Simply Red, and they had a tune called "Money's Too Tight to Mention." But we have to start mentioning money again, don't we? Yeah. And you've been very engaged in that. And you asked the question, why, who will pay, and how do we pay? And that begs the question: what do you think is the best way of using resources more effectively and more in a way that sort of generates results and the quality that we all can agree that we require in order to govern in a good way and process data in a good way?
First of all, I have to say, and you mentioned it in your introduction, that now we have an assessment out and a study, you know, how we're going to build our Norwegian system. So just a disclaimer, and don't think that things I say now it's done up for it. He's made up his mind. So this is kind of, you know, I'm just sharing my mind with you. Yeah. So beware of that. But still, I think that as I understand, or at least I think I understand what you've done in the Dutch context, is that you kind of do 80% of the work, or a big chunk of the work, and then you leave it in the end up to the entities, and there's the one who makes the final decisions and decides. That's kind of the ground model, as I understand it. And of course, as we talked about earlier, well, that will free a lot of resources for the municipalities. And it's many ways you can think about this. You could think about this in a way where you say that, well, to have a good system for how we're going to treat privacy, we should think about it as infrastructure, so then it should be financed over the state budget. You know, a new post, X million of Norwegian kroner, this is infrastructure, this is good, we pay for it. Or, but then you will get the problem, I think, that, well, if the state owns the whole thing, where do you actually have the agency and the responsibility for the entities? And so then you can solve that problem and say that, well, perhaps you should have a model as SICT has, you know, some kind of pay for using the services. The good thing about the SICT model, and I talked to Roar, the director of this many times, is that you actually get your owners to be more involved in what kind of solutions are you building, how are you building them, how efficient are they, and so on. And then you could have a mixed model. Of course, you could say that it's some user payment and it's some that's, you know, more infrastructure. But the reason for mentioning this is that it's not only about the money as the money itself as a scarce resource, but also how you make up the payment system has something to do about responsibility, how engaged you are, and how much interest perhaps you get from the system you're building.
Yeah.
If I may add something to that, because I really liked your phrase, it's not all about the money. And we've talked a lot about making sure everything goes efficiently. But it's also really about some sort of expertise, which is, it's really hard sometimes. There are really a lot of risks that you have to talk about and really go into detail with technical expertise, which we're happy that we have that externally, and also legal expertise. So even if money would not be an issue, it's also really about expertise, and that's something I'd really like to highlight here. That's an important one.
Yeah, I also have one.
Yeah.
Because in the Netherlands, we as the government also think about the societal impact that it has for the whole society.
Yeah.
So not to preach or anything, but we also think of that impact as an important one, because that's why we publish our assessments right online.
Yeah.
And there's a law in the Netherlands which promotes it, the Wet Open Overheid.
Yeah.
So we are kind of bound by the law as well.
Yeah.
But we also think of that impact, which is not really, you cannot really put an amount on it,
Yeah.
but it's like, impact on society. That's the difference between us and some other commercial party, right? So that's an important one for us as well.
Definitely. That begs a further question. That is, Morten was referring to SIKT. Is it Norwegian? Isn't that the Norwegian equivalent of Siven or SURF in the Netherlands? A member organization in which the municipalities or schools pay for the services provided. Isn't that a model you have in the Netherlands as well?
Yeah, I'm not really sure to say yes, because we're not from SURF and CFON, but we of course have SURF and CFON which deal with the education sector.
Yeah.
So probably yes.
But that's our interpretation of it. So it's also quite a similarity. But I do interpret you in this direction, Morten, that there is a real danger of help to helplessness and disclaiming responsibility if we do everything in the Norwegian context, so to speak, on a complete and absolute top-down approach. Is that your main point?
Well, I would say that, and what I would be most afraid of is, the 100% top-down approach and the 100% bottom-up approach. Because the 100% bottom-up approach is then again that you need to have capacity and competence in all those entities to do everything by themselves, and then you have the problem of efficiency. Whereas the top-down will be one size fits all, and you also will take away the responsibility, which is in the municipalities. And then again, I have to say, if I look out my office window, I don't see the whole of Norway. No. I just see a street, and the needs are different also in different municipalities, and our system is actually built on that, and we should not throw that out, I think.
Ida.
Yeah, I wanted to add that the thing that I think is the reason why we succeeded with our DPIA is that we had members in the project team from the municipalities. They have really felt where they have personal experience with how difficult it is to make DPIAs of hyperscalers, and if I would have to communicate one thing about this DPIA is that I want, or to the ones who develop the inquiry for national support services, is that I want those people to be a part of it, because it promotes ownership and also it makes the DPIA better.
I agree.
Living in a volatile financial world, and not to mention the frail political situation in both Europe and the rest of the world, is it feasible or realistic to expect that we can handle privacy and information security on a bottom-up basis in the future, in the first place, with the current situation on a security perspective? I know this is a bit beside the scope, but still it begs the question that the funding and the political side, is it going to help us in the future? Is it going to be a hindrance? Whoever wants to answer.
I'm the expert here. Yeah, well, it's a big question, and obviously it's not a straight yes or no to that. But more, I think I think of it that the way we build a society, the way we build our countries and our government systems, is that we have a model. It works quite well. But at the end of the day, you know, at some time it perhaps takes 100 years, but sometimes it only takes 5 years. You see that, well, this model doesn't really work that well anymore. And then I have to say, then it's two important things. The one is, of course, you have to change and look for a new model in time. So you have to do as, you know, do it in private sector, is that you have to adjust in time, you know. Not way ahead of time, because then it's really hard to see what kind of problems you need to solve, and of course not too late. So the same thinking you need to do in government. And then it's another thing that, and this is more, I have to say, my private meaning, but I also think that even so, if we had a model and it's worked for quite a few years and we changed the model, then we shouldn't look back and say, we did everything wrong before.
No.
Because that model was made in another context. So, I mean, the development of society actually necessitates that we need to rethink things, and still we can be happy that we did things, you know, quite well in the past. Yeah. So this is my kind of optimistic answer to your a bit depressing question.
Yeah. So you think? Yeah, it was depressive, but it is actually. This is not a session in which we are sharing religion or anything like that. You know, this is hardcore facts and realities. But so you think that is a workable way of rethinking a practical approach towards the challenges we're facing? Yeah.
But what we can't do is to say that, well, our system hinders us from doing wise things. You know, we can't do it. And it's the same with the law. You know, you could say precisely the same thing. Law is made there to make us, you know, make good decisions. But in the end, if actually the law doesn't work anymore, well, then we have to change the laws, and we have politicians for that and professionals for doing that.
Yeah. But the question again goes to both the Netherlands and to Norway. Do you experience that the legal framework accommodates and does it frame the municipalities and government in the role, responsibility, and the mandate given to you by national governments? Or is it conflict of interest between the laws as you experience it?
I don't think there's any conflict of interest,
No.
because we do have quite a clear mandate, and which states, well, this is what you can do, and this is basically what you cannot do.
Yeah.
And as I said earlier, of course, there's a clear distinction between responsibility. So it's clear what where are we responsible for, versus the public entity itself.
Yeah.
So.
Seila?
Yeah, it's a big question, right?
Yeah.
So in like the sense of legal framework, I think GDPR has a lot of open norms. I think you were referring to that earlier. So that's a tricky one. I agree on that one. But we are like a couple of years along the way, so we have had some guidance and some cases and some ECJ. We have NOYB and MOX and all that kind of stuff. So there have been a lot of we are paving the way, and it's shaping up. So I think it has become quite clear the way we are going. I would prefer, and that's my personal opinion, more European cooperation, right? So I very much appreciate this kind of cooperation, and I'm for it. But also within the European Union, we have the EDPB, we have the one-stop shop, but that's like inquiries, official inquiries, but maybe there's also a possibility to cooperate on another level, right? So I would kind of like to promote that, but I'm not working there. That's policy department. But we talk to them as well. We interact with all different parts of the ministry, and we give them advice when they ask for it, and sometimes when they don't ask for it, we also give advice. So
Good.
yeah, we're hoping for that one as well.
Do you subscribe to that point of view, Morten?
Yeah.
Yeah. Good. Yeah. António, from a vendor's perspective, would you welcome a more uniform approach from the European Union EES countries towards these topics and issues from a legal perspective?
I mean, who wouldn't, right? I think that's something that we see. There's probably more work that could be done in that area. The institutions are there, the knowledge is there. So I think time and time again, particularly you see this when you have a high-profile case in the European Court of Justice that creates a change, that creates uncertainty. That's when you most see private and public sector entities looking towards their regulators, looking towards their central authorities for more guidance. So the short answer to that question is yes, we would welcome that. On the other hand, I don't think we can forget that one of the reasons why the GDPR is such a good regulation is precisely because it is also open-ended. So you can't err too much on the side of prescription because one size may not fit all. And in fact, the GDPR is saying that one size does not fit all. And there's always a core of responsibility in the controller to understand what is best for them. So we need to be careful there. Yes, more guidance and even more specific guidance is much needed. It helps everyone, controllers, it helps us because then we can, if we need to develop products to meet those requirements, we know what the roadmap is. If we need to change something, we know what the roadmap is. Or conversely, it happens a lot of times, we can look at what we already have and say, oh, okay, we're already there. Either way, it helps us, it helps them, but let's not make it a rule because then I think you have much, much bigger problems.
Ida, you will get the last word before we start summing up here with Harald. But would you subscribe as well? Do you find it compelling what you hear from both the Directorate and from Dutch side and Google? What's your opinion?
Yeah, so I absolutely think we can centralize these efforts. I see it from a resource perspective. It's about knowledge. And what I would emphasize is that it still has to be done. Let's take away the best from the ground up, right? Let's take away like the best knowledge that we have on the municipality level because it does exist, and that's the only way we can get a umbrella DPA that the municipalities recognize and can and actually respond to their needs. So I think it's completely okay to do this within the framework that we have. And I also am really, because we talked about this previously, that in the Netherlands it's you're on the compliance level. It is not linked to acquisition or to So
Procurement.
to procurement. So it is possible.
I think it's about time Harald enters the podium as well. But before we end up, I'd like you to say that, I'd like to sum up by saying that the corporation, under a given auspices and given authority, providing the necessary help to local schools and municipalities, that basically sums up what we have to start doing in a different way now compared to what we have been doing previously, because the zero alternative doesn't work. I think we can all agree on that one. And the various differences between Holland and Norway is something that I reckon you can learn from us, and we can definitely learn from you. So on that end, I will say thank you so much for being in the audience and for you in the up here. And Harald, you would like to sum it all up, will you?
Well, I think you summed it very good up. But I will say thank you all. This is inspiring. So I would like to thank Seila and Bas from the Ministry of Justice and Security in the Netherlands. We'll say thank you to you, Morten, from the Directorate, and to you, António, from Google, and Ida from the KS. I hope the audience has been inspired, like I've been, and I hope that we can continue to discuss this matter in other occasions, at other stages, and that the agencies in the public sector, not only just the education sector, but in the whole public sector, will discuss this matter and make wise decisions for us all, because we need decisions on this matter. So thank you all. Thank you who has been with us by the internet, and have a good evening and night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, I want to ask, how many people are you working on this?
With our team?
Yeah.